Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The content provided in this video series is for educational, analytical, and entertainment purposes only. It focuses on a critical review of academic literature, sociological frameworks, and historical legal texts surrounding family structures and the dissolution of marriage in the United States. This analysis does not constitute legal advice, psychological counseling, financial planning, or professional consultation of any kind. Family law, asset division, and matrimonial proceedings vary drastically by jurisdiction, state statutes, and individual circumstances. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own independent due diligence and consult with licensed legal professionals, qualified therapists, or certified financial advisors regarding their specific situations before making any decisions based on historical trends or case studies discussed herein. For over 4 decades, a single statistical ghost has haunted the halls of American academia, dictated the curriculum of family law programs, and quietly shaped the rulings handed down in family courts across the United States. You have likely heard it repeated as an unshakable truth in university lecture halls, mainstream media broadcasts, and foundational sociological treatises, the definitive claim that exactly 50% of all marriages in the United States inevitably end in dissolution. But when we look beneath the surface of the seminal academic texts that built this narrative, we uncover a profound systemic misalignment between institutional theory and human reality. The literature taught to generations of family lawyers, sociologists, and policymakers does not merely observe the divorce journey. It actively constructs a rigid, often flawed template that fails to account for the real-world complexities of modern relationships. If we examine historical trends and empirical case studies, we discover that the academic representation of marriage dissolution has frequently relied on outdated methodologies, skewed sample sizes, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the economic and psychological trajectories of those undergoing this profound life transition. This creates a critical disconnect. The very textbooks meant to decode the human experience of marital separation have instead institutionalized a set of biases that impact real lives, real assets, and real custody battles. To understand how deep this rabbit hole goes, we must look at a stunning contradiction hidden within the academic canon. While prominent mid-century and late 20th century textbooks painted a monolithic picture of inevitable familial collapse, contemporary data reveals a completely different trajectory. Marital instability has actually been declining among major demographics for years. Yet the academic curriculum taught to future judges and legal professionals remains anchored in frameworks developed during the immediate aftermath of the 1970s no-fault divorce revolution. This reliance on historical anomalies has created a structural bias within academic analysis, one that pathologizes the divorce journey rather than understanding it as a complex process of socio-economic restructuring. Why did our highest institutions of learning get this so wrong, and why do they continue to replicate these errors? By tracking the evolution of these texts, we expose a hidden loop. Academic theories influence legal precedents dictate court outcomes, and those court outcomes are then cited by academics to prove their original, flawed theories. This means that anyone navigating the legal or emotional reality of a broken marriage today is fighting against a ghost in the machine, a theoretical model designed in a university tower that bears little resemblance to their actual lived experience. This brings us to the core problem we are solving for you today. If you are an American citizen trying to understand the modern landscape of family structures, or if you find yourself navigating the turbulent waters of marital separation, you are operating in an environment dictated by these exact text-based misrepresentations. This deep dive masterclass is designed to dismantle those institutional myths, providing you with a rigorous analytical roadmap of how the academic system has misrepresented the divorce journey. We are going to look at the historical data, deconstruct the methodologies of influential longitudinal studies, and reveal the stark contrast between textbook narratives and real-world outcomes. By understanding the systemic biases inherent in these academic texts, you will gain the intellectual clarity needed to see through outdated societal stigmas, comprehend the structural machinery behind family court dynamics, and recognize the true economic and psychological phases of rebuilding a life. We are moving past the superficial talking points and diving into a granular critique of the literature, empowering you with knowledge that has been obscured by academic dogma for decades. To fully grasp the scope of this critique, we must first examine how early American sociology texts established a framework of deviance around the dissolution of marriage. Throughout the mid-20th century, dominant academic models, heavily influenced by structural functionalist theory, viewed the nuclear family as a static, delicate mechanism. Any deviation from this model was classified not as a common life transition, but as a systemic failure. Textbooks from this era routinely utilized language that framed the end of a marriage as a catastrophic event, resulting from individual moral or psychological pathology. Case studies from the 1950s and 1960s frequently ignored the underlying economic pressures, shifting labor markets, and evolving legal rights of women, choosing instead to focus on idealized notions of domestic stability. When the no-fault divorce revolution swept across the United States, beginning with California in 1969, the academic establishment was caught entirely unprepared. Rather than adapting their models to reflect a major structural shift in legal autonomy and individual freedom, many foundational texts simply scaled up their language of crisis. This crisis-oriented framework led to the widespread adoption of deeply flawed methodology. For instance, early longitudinal studies on families experiencing separation often relied on incredibly small, non-representative sample sizes. One famous study that heavily influenced both academic literature and public policy for decades drew its conclusions from a self-selected group of families in a single affluent California county, yet its findings were generalized to represent the entire socio-economic spectrum of the United States. Academic texts swallowed these conclusions whole, printing them as absolute sociological laws. They failed to account for variables such as regional economic disparities, educational backgrounds, and the differing baseline stability of marriages across diverse communities. By flattening the diverse reality of the American public into a singular tragic narrative, these texts created a historical trend of exaggeration that persists in academic citations to this day. Furthermore, the representation of the economic journey within these texts has been historically asymmetric. For decades, standard university textbooks presented a binary economic outcome: the immediate financial ruin of one party versus the absolute financial insulation of another. While historical trends certainly show significant economic vulnerabilities, particularly for primary caregivers, the academic literature often relied on flawed mathematical models that inflated these disparities to an impossible degree. Statistical errors in widely cited academic papers from the 1980s claimed an immediate, massive divergence in post-divorce standards of living, errors that took over a decade for peer reviewers to formally correct. By the time the corrections were published, however, the original exaggerated statistics had already been integrated into family law textbooks, cited in judicial handbooks, and utilized to justify rigid formulas for asset distribution and alimony that did not accurately reflect the nuanced, long-term financial recovery trajectories of modern individuals. By deconstructing these texts, we are not just engaging in an abstract academic exercise. We are uncovering the blueprint of the institutional biases that shape public perception, media narratives, and legal frameworks in the United States today. When we look at potential outcomes for individuals entering this journey, the gap between what the textbooks predict and what real-world case studies demonstrate is vast. This masterclass will systematically break down that gap across 10 distinct dimensions, moving from the historical methodology of the 20th century to the modern algorithmic biases of the 21st. By the end of this series, you will possess a sophisticated, comprehensive understanding of how the academic representation of the divorce journey was built, where it failed, and how you can use empirical reality to override institutional myth. To understand exactly how this academic distortion manifests in real life, let us examine the fundamental flaw of the linear timeline model, taught in modern sociology and family law textbooks. Imagine a typical American professional in 2026. Let us call him Robert, living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Robert is navigating the dissolution of a 12-year marriage. When Robert's legal counsel or a court-appointed mediator references the standard academic literature, they are looking at a highly rigid, 5-stage progression model. This model, popularized in late 20th century textbooks and still printed in current editions, dictates that an individual must move sequentially through emotional separation, legal dissolution, economic settlement, co-parenting adjustment, and finally community reorganization. In the real world of 2026, however, this timeline is entirely asynchronous. Robert might experience economic reorganization 3 years before the legal process even concludes due to modern remote work adjustments, independent asset management, and collaborative property separation. Conversely, his emotional separation might lag 5 years behind the legal decree. Yet, because the academic texts insist on a linear path, Any deviation from this sequence is labeled by court-appointed evaluators as a pathological coping mechanism or an inability to achieve closure. This is not a harmless academic oversight. It directly influences custody evaluations and psychological assessments used in family courts today, where individuals are penalized simply because their lives do not conform to an outdated textbook chart. Let us look at another case study involving historical trends in economic analysis. For decades, academic texts have relied on a metric known as the income-to-need ratio to illustrate the financial impact of marital separation. Imagine a scenario involving a woman named Jessica in Austin, Texas, in 2026. Jessica is a mid-level corporate manager navigating a separation. Standard family law textbooks used in major U.S. universities routinely cite historical trends from the mid-1980s suggesting that women experience an immediate 73% drop in their standard of living post-separation, while men experience an absolute 42% financial windfall. This specific statistic originated from a highly publicized academic study that became the bedrock of modern U.S. alimony and child support textbooks. The structural failure here is monumental. Years after that study was integrated into university curricula, independent researchers uncovered a profound computer programming error in the original data analysis. The actual historical trend when re-evaluated showed a 27% decline for women and a 10% increase for men. While a 27% drop is still a significant socio-economic challenge requiring serious policy interventions, the academic text narrative printed a 73% drop as an unshakable law of physics. By the time the statistical error was formally corrected, the original exaggerated numbers had already spent a decade anchoring the mindsets of text authors, law professors, and state legislators. Even today in 2026, the echo chamber of academic citations means that the ghost of this 73% myth continues to linger in the prefaces of family law volumes, creating a climate of intense adversarial fear that forces real-world legal strategies to become highly defensive and combative from day one. This systemic distortion deepens when we critique how academic literature handles the psychological trajectory of children. The dominant narrative found in foundational human development textbooks relies heavily on what sociologists call the deficit model. This model operates on the absolute assumption that a single-parent household or a dual household structure is inherently fractured, producing measurable cognitive and social deficits in children. To see this in action, look at the case studies cited in standard psychology curricula across the United States. These studies frequently compare children from separated families against an idealized, conflict-free nuclear family control group. This represents a massive methodological error, taught to thousands of undergraduate students every semester. A scientifically rigorous comparison would contrast children from separated families against children who remain in high conflict, intact nuclear families. When contemporary independent researchers correct this bias, they discover that potential outcomes for children in stable, cooperative dual households are statistically indistinguishable from those in low-conflict nuclear families. Yet, the textbooks used to train child psychologists, family therapists, and custody evaluators in 2026 continue to emphasize the deficit model. This creates an institutional bias where professionals are trained to look for pathology in children of divorce, even when the children are demonstrating remarkable adaptability and resilience. Let us transition to the legal-centric bias that permeates U.S. academic texts. If you open any standard textbook on the sociology of the family, the legal decree of divorce is treated as the definitive epicenter of the entire journey. The literature structures its entire narrative around the filing date, the trial date, and the signing of the final judgment. But imagine if we analyzed any other major life transition, such as career shifts or retirement, solely through the lens of the day the paperwork was signed. It would be absurd. Case studies of families navigating this process in 2026 show that the actual human journey occurs in the silent, unmeasured intervals between legal filings. It occurs in the informal negotiations over text messages, the gradual adjustments to weekend schedules, and the quiet recalibration of social circles. By centering the entire academic narrative on the legal battle, the literature conditions students, lawyers, and the public to view the courtroom as the primary arena of resolution. This legal-centric bias creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, driving individuals away from collaborative, out-of-court restructuring models, and pushing them into high-stakes litigation that drains family assets and escalates emotional distress. We also must challenge the concept of the marital stability index, often highlighted in academic texts. These indexes are used by researchers to predict which couples are most vulnerable to separation. The texts frequently list variables like age at marriage, educational attainment, and income levels as static predictors. However, this deterministic approach completely misses the dynamic, fluid nature of modern relationships in 2026. It ignores the role of sudden macroeconomic shifts, changes in societal expectations, and the psychological impact of digital connectivity. By presenting these predictive variables as absolute indicators, academic literature creates an environment of deterministic pessimism. When a family lawyer or a counselor looks at a couple through the lens of these textbooks, they see a statistical probability rather than a dynamic human system capable of adaptation and resilience. To truly understand how deeply embedded these flaws are, consider the way academic literature defines the concept of a successful family. In almost all mainstream U.S. textbooks, success is implicitly defined by longevity. A marriage that lasts 50 years, regardless of the level of toxicity, conflict, or emotional neglect within that household, is classified as a success. A marriage that lasts 15 years, produces healthy, well-adjusted children, and ends in a mutual, respectful decision to separate is classified in the literature as a marital dissolution or a family breakdown. This semantic framing matters. It establishes an institutional paradigm where survival is valued above well-being. This paradigm trickles down from academic texts into public policy, shaping tax incentives, legal structures, and community support systems in a way that penalizes healthy, necessary separation while rewarding prolonged, destructive marital stagnation. The academic texts that shape public understanding are not just lagging behind reality. They are actively insulated from it by a system of institutional inertia. Textbook publishers, university departments, and professional associations rely on a closed loop of citations, where old theories are continuously recycled and repackaged with new covers. But what happens when these recycled theories encounter the hyper-accelerated reality of the mid-2020s? What happens when the outdated frameworks used to calculate child support, evaluate parental fitness, and predict psychological outcomes are applied to a generation of Americans navigating an economy and a society that those mid-century academics could never have imagined? The friction between textbook theory and real-world execution is reaching a breaking point, and the consequences are being borne by everyday families across the United States. As we look closer at this systemic failure, we must confront a disturbing pattern in how the academic canon treats the intersection of gender and financial autonomy during marital separation. The textbooks used in family law seminars across the United States routinely operate on a paradigm developed when the American workforce was fundamentally different from what we see in 2026. This creates a massive blind spot, particularly when evaluating the modern gig economy, remote corporate structures, and independent digital entrepreneurship. How exactly do these outdated academic formulas miscalculate modern wealth generation? And how does this miscalculation create an inherently adversarial environment in the courtroom? More importantly, what happens when we look at the hidden data that these textbooks deliberately leave out? Data that completely flips the conventional narrative of post-divorce psychological recovery. To discover how these institutional blind spots directly impact the division of modern assets and the evaluation of parental capability, we must turn our attention to the specific hidden mechanics of court-ordered mediation frameworks, which we will dissect in the very next part of this masterclass. Court-ordered mediation frameworks are routinely presented in university textbooks as a progressive, therapeutic alternative to adversarial litigation. If you read the foundational literature taught in law schools and family counseling programs across the United States, mediation is framed as a harmonious sanctuary where two rational actors can sit across a table, strip away their emotional baggage, and systematically dismantle a shared life through cooperative compromise. The academic consensus relies heavily on interest-based bargaining models, a concept popularized by elite university negotiation projects in the late 20th century. This model posits that underneath every rigid position, such as a dispute over a specific asset or a custody schedule, lies a set of core interests that can be mutually satisfied if properly excavated by a trained neutral third party. But when we test this academic model against the empirical reality of family court systems in 2026, the theoretical scaffolding completely collapses. To see how this distortion functions in practice, let us examine a detailed case study involving a professional named Sarah, living in Seattle, Washington, in 2026. Sarah is navigating a court-ordered mediation track as part of her marital dissolution process. Her spouse is a senior executive at a technology firm who, over the course of a 14-year marriage, maintained exclusive control over the household complex financial ecosystem, including equity compensation structures, restricted stock units, and digital investment portfolios. When Sarah and her spouse enter the mediation room, the mediator operates under the precise protocols established by standard academic curricula. These protocols dictate an absolute assumption of symmetrical information and equal bargaining power. The textbook guidelines instruct the mediator to treat both parties as equal participants in a balanced negotiation. However, this theoretical assumption completely ignores the structural reality of asymmetrical financial literacy and psychological coercion. Because the academic literature favors procedural efficiency and voluntary settlement over rigorous discovery, the mediator is trained to push for a rapid resolution based on whatever financial documents are readily available on the table. In Sarah's case, the textbook-mandated process actively works against her. Step 1 of the standard academic mediation model involves defining the issues. But because Sarah has been systematically excluded from the management of the marital estate, she cannot accurately define the issues without formal, court-sanctioned financial discovery. The mediator, following university-taught guidelines that view formal discovery as an aggressive, adversarial tactic that stalls the cooperative process, discourages Sarah from pausing the mediation to conduct a forensic audit. Instead, the mediator utilizes standard interest-based techniques, asking Sarah to focus on her future security rather than dwelling on past financial accounting. The potential outcome of this methodology is a rushed, structurally flawed settlement where Sarah unknowingly relinquishes her legal rights to millions of dollars in marital property, simply because the academic framework values transactional closure over empirical accuracy. This brings us to a deeper critique of how academic texts conceptualize the role of neutrality. In the literature, the neutrality of the mediator is treated as a sacred, objective shield that protects both parties from the inherent biases of a traditional courtroom. Textbooks teach that a neutral mediator does not judge, does not take sides, and does not impose decisions. However, case studies from across the United States demonstrate that absolute neutrality in the face of a severe power imbalance is not objective. It is actively complicit in reinforcing that imbalance. If one party is highly manipulative, financially sophisticated, or psychologically dominant, a mediator who strictly adheres to the textbook definition of neutrality will allow that dominant party to control the tempo, tone, and direction of the negotiation, under the guise of respecting party autonomy. Furthermore, contemporary academic literature in 2026 continues to suffer from a profound modern asset mismatch. The standard family law and mediation textbooks used to train professionals were structurally designed around an economic reality that no longer exists. The case studies embedded in these textbooks still assume that a family's primary assets consist of a single suburban home with a traditional fixed-rate mortgage, a joint checking account, 2 vehicles, and perhaps a defined benefit pension plan. Now look at the reality of 2026. A modern American household estate frequently includes a highly fragmented array of digital-era assets. We see fractional real estate investments, independent digital consulting firms with shifting intellectual property values, remote contract income streams, specialized equity options, and decentralized financial instruments. Standard academic mediation models offer absolutely no granular guidance on how to evaluate or divide these complex, volatile assets in a cooperative, unrepresented environment. Instead, the textbooks fall back on vague, generalized advice about consulting outside experts, completely ignoring the fact that the average middle-class American family cannot afford to hire a team of independent valuation experts while simultaneously paying for mediation and legal retainers. The friction between the simplistic asset models in university texts and the hyper-complex financial realities of 2026 forces many individuals out of the mediation track entirely, or worse, traps them in settlements that fail to account for the true future value of their marital property. We must also critically analyze how academic literature represents the creation of parenting plans within the mediation framework. The dominant narrative taught to family counselors relies heavily on co-parenting paradigms that promote a uniform 50-50 physical custody split as the baseline for a successful outcome. The texts present this arrangement as an enlightened, modern standard that automatically reduces conflict and ensures equal parental involvement. While a cooperative, equal parenting structure can produce excellent outcomes under specific, highly collaborative conditions, the academic texts print this model as a universal solution, largely ignoring the logistical and economic constraints of the modern American working class. Imagine the operational reality for millions of Americans in 2026. who do not possess the luxury of flexible remote work arrangements. For workers in healthcare, logistics, manufacturing, or retail service sectors, a rigid 50-50 alternating week schedule requires an extraordinary amount of geographical proximity, financial resources to maintain two identical, fully functioning households, and a level of workplace flexibility that simply does not exist for the average employee. When textbooks push mediation professionals to enforce this idealized model onto families whose material realities cannot support it, the structural failure is immediate. Case studies show that within 18 months of executing a textbook-inspired parenting plan, many families find themselves in a state of chronic logistical crisis, leading to school attendance disruptions, extreme parental burnout, and an inevitable return to the family court system to litigate a modification. The academic representation of the divorce journey has effectively institutionalized a sanitized, idealized version of human conflict. By treating marital dissolution as a clinical problem to be solved through structured communication and interest-based negotiation charts, the literature completely fails to prepare professionals for the raw, asymmetric realities of high-conflict separations. The textbooks measure the success of a mediation framework solely by its settlement rate, creating a dangerous incentive structure where administrative speed is prioritized over substantive fairness. But what happens when we look beyond the mediation room and analyze the actual mathematical formulas used to calculate child support and alimony across the United States? These formulas, which are coded into the software programs used by every family court judge in the country, are derived directly from the economic theories printed in these very same academic texts. As we peel back the layers of these statutory calculations, we discover an even more profound systemic error, one that relies on outdated consumption data and flawed assumptions about household expenditures in the modern economy. To understand how these automated legal formulas create an invisible financial trap for unsuspecting parents, and to see the exact data that exposes this hidden mechanism, we must analyze the structural intersection of academic economics and state statutory guidelines, which we will dissect in the next part of this masterclass. The automated statutory formulas that dictate child support and alimony allocations across the United States today are not neutral mathematical truths. Instead, they are the direct algorithmic translation of deeply flawed economic theories published in late 20th century academic journals. To trace how these theoretical models became hard-coded into the American legal machinery, we must examine the structural framework of the income shares model. Developed in the mid-1980s through academic grants and adopted by the vast majority of U.S. states, this model operates on a central economic premise: that a child should receive the exact same proportion of parental income after a separation that they would have received if the household had remained intact. On paper, this sounds like an equitable, child-centric philosophy. In practice, the mathematical scaffolding supporting this model relies on antiquated econometric estimators that completely fail to reflect the macroeconomic realities faced by families in 2026. To discover the root of this systemic miscalculation, we have to look at the specific methodologies taught in advanced family economics courses, namely the Rothbarth and Engel estimators. These academic tools attempt to calculate the actual cost of raising a child by analyzing household spending patterns. The Engel methodology assumes that the percentage of a household budget allocated to food determines its overall standard of living, while the Rothbarth methodology isolates expenditures on adult-specific goods, like adult clothing, to infer how much income is being diverted to the children. These academic models are built on consumer expenditure surveys that are decades old. They were designed during an era when the American economy was characterized by lower baseline housing costs, predictable utility expenses, and a complete absence of digital infrastructure requirements. When these outdated academic consumption schedules are hard-coded into modern family law software, the real-world execution is disastrous. Imagine an IT infrastructure specialist named David, living in Denver, Colorado, in the year 2026. David is navigating the dissolution of a 15-year marriage and has 2 school-aged children. When the court runs David's financial metrics through the state-mandated child support calculator, the software uses a static statutory grid derived directly from these old academic models. The software takes the combined gross income of both parents, applies a standardized, highly generalized deduction matrix for taxes, and references a fixed consumption curve to determine the basic child support obligation. The structural failure here is immediate and severe. The academic charts used by the court assume a static, predictable distribution of household expenses. But in 2026, the baseline cost configuration of an American household has radically changed. The software's underlying algorithm does not account for the hyperinflationary realities of modern childcare, specialized healthcare premiums, or the mandatory digital connectivity infrastructure required for remote education and modern literacy. Extracurricular activities, academic tutoring, and mental health resources, which are treated by older economic textbooks as luxury, optional expenditures, are now baseline necessities for a child's development and competitive integration into the modern school system. By relying on a consumption index that treats a child's economic footprint as if it were still the year 1985, the automated legal formulas consistently underestimate the true marginal cost of raising children in a modern urban environment. Furthermore, these academic economic models suffer from a massive structural blind spot regarding the duplication of capital expenditures. The textbooks operating behind state statutes assume that when a family unit splits, the variable costs like food and clothing shift proportionally to whoever has the children, while the fixed costs remain isolated within the primary custodian's residence. This theoretical assumption is entirely detached from the logistical reality of 2026 co-parenting. If David and his co-parent maintain a shared parenting schedule, both households must independently maintain fully functioning residential infrastructure. This means David must secure a multi-bedroom apartment in a hyper-competitive Denver real estate market to accommodate his children during his parenting time, effectively duplicating the fixed housing costs, utility bases, internet connections, furniture, and clothing pools of the primary household. The academic formulas treat the non-custodial parent's home as a temporary, low-cost destination rather than a fully functioning, parallel domestic node, forcing parents to take on significant debt just to fulfill basic housing requirements mandated by custody courts. This mathematical distortion deepens when we critique how academic texts handle the concept of spousal support, or alimony. The literature used to train family law students heavily promotes the marital standard of living as the definitive benchmark for determining post-separation financial transfers. The academic theory suggests that a less-earning spouse should be insulated from the economic shock of separation by utilizing formulas that attempt to equalize the standard of living achieved during the marriage. Let us break down the mathematical impossibility of this assumption. In a typical middle-class or upper-middle-class American household, 100% of the combined parental income is fully optimized to support a single domestic infrastructure. When that single household splits into two separate geographic entities, the total operational cost of survival increases by an estimated 30 to 40% due to the immediate loss of economies of scale. You now have two separate rents or mortgages, two sets of heating and cooling bills, two independent insurance policies, and two distinct sets of household maintenance costs. Because it is mathematically impossible to sustain two separate households at the exact same standard of living as a single combined household on the exact same pool of income, the textbook formulas create an inherently adversarial zero-sum trap. The automated legal software, attempting to satisfy an impossible academic benchmark, outputs support obligations that frequently leave the paying spouse with a net disposable income that falls below their actual cost of living, while simultaneously failing to provide the receiving spouse with enough capital to fully offset the inflationary pressures of running the primary home. This creates a state of chronic financial scarcity for both parties, a scarcity that is not caused by individual financial mismanagement, but by the structural failure of the academic formulas governing the system. The true danger of this system lies in the way future legal professionals are socialized to interact with it. In modern U.S. law schools, students are rarely taught to critically analyze the econometric assumptions, the outdated consumer surveys, or the regional biases embedded within these statutory formulas. Instead, they are trained to become bureaucratic technicians. They learn how to input numbers into software applications, click a generate button, and accept the automated output as an absolute, equitable truth. When these students become attorneys and judges, they lack the analytical tools to challenge the software's findings, even when confronted with empirical evidence that the calculated support amounts will cause immediate financial insolvency or prevent a parent from maintaining a safe environment for their children. This mechanical application of flawed academic theory has created an invisible financial trap that quietly decimates the economic stability of countless American families every year. It drives individuals into a continuous cycle of high-stakes litigation, forcing them to spend tens of thousands of dollars on legal fees just to contest a modification of an unworkable, software-generated order. But the financial destruction is only the first phase of this systemic failure. What happens when the profound economic strain caused by these automated formulas collides with the clinical and psychological frameworks taught in university psychology departments? When a parent is pushed to the brink of financial collapse by a textbook spreadsheet, how is that resulting stress weaponized against them in the courtroom? To understand how academic psychology and gender studies texts have institutionalized a highly controversial framework for evaluating parental fitness, emotional trauma, and custody capability, we must shift our analysis from the financial ledger to the clinical evaluation room, which we will dissect in the very next part of this masterclass. When you step inside the clinical evaluation room, you are entering an environment governed by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders and forensic psychometric instruments that are treated by university psychology departments as absolute, objective mirrors of the human psyche. In a high-stakes custody dispute, the academic literature dictates that a court-appointed forensic psychologist must conduct a comprehensive psychological evaluation to determine the best interests of the child. The foundational textbooks used to train these clinical professionals promote a battery of standardized tests as the ultimate defense against parental bias. Chief among these is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, utilized in its updated 3rd edition format in 2026. The structural failure of this academic paradigm lies in a profound misunderstanding of situational trauma versus chronic personality pathology. The psychometric scales embedded within these inventories were historically developed by analyzing deeply institutionalized populations or individuals with long-standing, severe psychiatric disorders. When a textbook instructs a student to score and interpret these profiles, the underlying algorithms assume a baseline of environmental stability. The test is designed to measure enduring personality traits. However, when an individual is thrust into the meat grinder of the American family court system, their environmental baseline is completely shattered. To see this systemic misclassification play out in real time, consider the case study of a pediatric nurse named Elena, living in Chicago, Illinois, in the year 2026. Elena is undergoing a court-ordered custody evaluation after a high-conflict separation. She is facing the potential loss of primary residential custody of her 2 young children. Elena is sleep-deprived, operating under intense financial scarcity due to the exact statutory formulas discussed previously, and experiencing acute situational anxiety regarding the safety and future stability of her household. When the forensic evaluator administers the psychometric inventory, Elena answers hundreds of true or false questions designed to detect underlying psychological deviations. When the evaluator inputs Elena's raw data into the scoring software, the resulting profile shows significant elevations on the scales measuring hysteria, depression, and paranoia. According to the standard clinical textbooks used to train graduate students at elite universities, an elevated profile on these specific scales indicates an individual who is defensive, emotionally unstable, and prone to misinterpreting the motives of others. The textbook interpretation guidelines offer a highly pathologized view of this data, suggesting that a parent with these scores may lack the emotional regulation necessary to provide a stable environment for developing children. This interpretation represents a monumental analytical error that is replicated in family courts every single day. The academic framework completely fails to differentiate between a structural personality disorder and a perfectly rational, acute psychological response to a high-stakes threat. Elena is not clinically paranoid. She is situationally vigilant because her parental rights and her children's daily well-being are actively being contested in an adversarial arena. She is not clinically depressed. She is experiencing profound grief over the dissolution of her family unit and the structural collapse of her economic security. Yet, because the academic literature treats these test scores as context-independent metrics of baseline fitness, the evaluator writes a formal forensic report certifying Elena as emotionally volatile, a report that a family court judge will likely adopt as an objective scientific truth. This clinical distortion is further compounded by a massive academic schism between mainstream forensic psychology textbooks and modern gender studies curricula. In one building on a university campus, future custody evaluators are trained using literature that prioritizes the concept of parental alienation. This framework suggests that if a child expresses aversion or resistance to spending time with one parent, it is highly probable that the primary custodian has psychologically programmed, or alienated, the child against the other parent. The textbooks operating within this paradigm teach students to look for subtle signs of maternal or paternal brainwashing, framing any protective boundary setting by the primary caregiver as an uncooperative, pathologized attempt to destroy the child's relationship with the other parent. Meanwhile, in another building on the exact same campus, sociology and gender studies textbooks present a completely contradictory framework centered on coercive control and trauma-informed care. This literature argues that child resistance is frequently a natural, protective response to witnessing domestic conflict or experiencing subtle forms of psychological abuse within the household. When these two opposing academic dogmas collide in the clinical evaluation room, the result is an absolute lottery of justice. If Elena's case is assigned to an evaluator whose university training was anchored in the parental alienation paradigm, her valid expressions of concern regarding her spouse's volatile behavior will be weaponized against her. The evaluator will interpret her concerns as evidence of an alienating gatekeeper profile. Conversely, if the evaluator was trained in a trauma-informed sociological framework, the exact same behavioral data will be interpreted as a justified survival response. The real-world consequence of this academic incoherence is that parental fitness is no longer evaluated on the basis of empirical, observable parenting history. Instead, it becomes a battle of theoretical alignment. The family court system transforms into a theater where high-priced forensic experts are hired to trade competing textbook citations, each claiming that their specific academic framework possesses the true key to decoding the human soul. The parents themselves are reduced to static caricatures, forced to conform to whatever psychological profile their legal team believes will best appease the prevailing academic biases of the presiding judge. Furthermore, university textbooks completely gloss over the predatory economic structures that support the forensic evaluation industry. The literature presents the custody evaluation as a clean, clinical intervention performed by an objective scientist in the pursuit of truth. The textbooks never mention that a standard custody evaluation in 2026 costs between $15,000 and $40,000, an amount that must be paid out of pocket by families already experiencing extreme financial duress. The academic models completely ignore the structural incentive for evaluators to prolong the assessment process, order supplementary psychometric testing, and recommend ongoing, court-monitored therapeutic interventions that ensure a continuous stream of revenue for their clinical peers. By treating the human mind as a quantifiable spreadsheet and the trauma of family separation as a diagnostic checklist, the academic canon has effectively institutionalized a system that punishes vulnerability and rewards pathological calculation. A parent who is genuinely devastated by the breakup of their home will show up to the evaluation raw, emotional, and defensive, resulting in a highly elevated, pathologized test profile. Meanwhile, an individual who possesses narcissistic or sociopathic traits can easily study the academic textbook parameters of these psychometric tests, manipulate their answers to project a perfectly balanced, hyper-rational profile, and emerge from the evaluation certified by science as the ideal parent. The friction between this sanitized textbook psychology and the raw, unscripted reality of human trauma is tearing real American families apart, leaving a trail of psychological devastation that the literature completely fails to document. But what happens when we move beyond the closed doors of the clinical evaluation room and look at how these academic misrepresentations manifest in the digital infrastructure of modern family management? In 2026, the divorce journey is no longer just mediated by judges and therapists. It is increasingly governed by court-mandated communication applications, algorithmic surveillance tools, and digital scheduling networks that track every text message, every dollar spent, and every minute of parenting time. To understand how academic sociological texts have completely failed to account for this hyper-surveilled digital reality, and to see the exact ways these communication algorithms are being weaponized in modern custody battles, we must turn our attention to the structural intersection of technology and post-separation communication, which we will dissect in the very next part of this masterclass. When we investigate the contemporary landscape of post-separation life in the United States, we discover that the academic canon remains trapped in an analog past, completely blind to the hyper-surveilled digital infrastructure that defines the modern experience. Standard sociological textbooks and family communication curricula taught in American universities continue to rely on interpersonal relationship models developed in the late 20th century. These outdated frameworks focus heavily on face-to-face dialogue, the mechanics of active listening, and the implementation of traditional verbal syntax strategies such as I statements to mitigate parental conflict. The literature operates on the assumption that post-separation communication occurs in a vacuum of private, unrecorded interactions where emotional intelligence and psychological readiness are the primary variables determining success or failure. This academic narrative represents a profound detachment from the operational reality of family law in 2026. Across the United States, family courts are increasingly bypassing traditional interpersonal mediation in favor of mandating the use of specialized, court-monitored communication applications. Software platforms function as a permanent, immutable digital repository for every text, schedule change, expense request, and phone call between separated parents. When university textbooks briefly mention these technological interventions, they frame them as neutral, benign tools designed to facilitate administrative accountability and reduce direct emotional friction. The academic literature completely fails to analyze the structural transformation of communication that occurs when every single syllable typed by a parent is transformed into a permanent, legally binding court exhibit. To comprehend the true mechanics of this digital panopticon, let us look at a detailed case study involving an operations manager named Marcus, living in Columbus, Ohio, in the year 2026. Marcus is navigating a highly contentious co-parenting arrangement following a complex separation. Under a standard domestic relations order influenced by textbook recommendations on conflict reduction, Marcus and his co-parent are strictly prohibited from communicating via personal email, cellular text messaging, or telephone. They are legally required to conduct 100% of their interactions within a court-sanctioned family management application. The immediate potential outcome of this mandate is not the peaceful, structured boundaries promised by academic theory, but rather the total weaponization of digital literacy. Because the platform records the exact timestamp of when a message is delivered, when it is opened, and how many minutes elapse before a response is generated, the app changes from a communication tool into an arena of tactical documentation. In Marcus's case, his co-parent utilizes a strategy known as litigation-focused text bombing. Every Sunday evening, Marcus receives an exceptionally long multi-paragraph message written in an artificially polite, highly legalistic tone. This text is carefully constructed to project an image of hyper-cooperation to any future judge or custody evaluator who might read the log. Marcus, working demanding shifts in a logistics facility, often lacks the immediate time or the specific linguistic training to craft an equally calculated response. If he responds rapidly with brief, direct logistical answers to coordinate his children's school pickups, his short sentences are flagged by the application's integrated algorithmic sentiment analysis tool. In 2026, these communication platforms feature proprietary artificial intelligence engines designed to scan text for patterns of aggression, passive-aggressive phrasing, or non-cooperative behavior. The algorithm processes Marcus's hurried, unpolished responses and assigns them a negative sentiment score, color-coding his messages in red or yellow on the administrative dashboard. When Marcus's case returns to the family court for a modification hearing, his co-parent's legal counsel does not present a narrative of human nuance. Instead, they export a standardized, software-generated PDF report spanning hundreds of pages. This report displays Marcus's elevated negative sentiment scores alongside timestamps, showing that he routinely takes over 4 hours to respond to complex, multi-layered demands. The family court judge, operating under a heavy caseload and relying on the textbook assumption that these digital metrics provide an objective assessment of parental cooperation, accepts the algorithmic printout as definitive proof that Marcus is an uncooperative, high-conflict parent. The actual context of Marcus's labor schedule, his financial strain, and the calculated provocation behind the original messages is completely erased by the clinical authority of the software report. This case study exposes the total failure of academic texts to theorize the concept of performative communication. By treating technology as a simple conduit for information, the literature ignores how the presence of a permanent digital archive forces individuals to engage in continuous performance art for an invisible judicial audience. Parents are no longer communicating to solve practical domestic problems. They are communicating to build a litigation record. This structural dynamic actively incentivizes the escalation of conflict, as both parties are driven to continuously bait each other into sending messages that will score poorly on algorithmic scales or appear unreasonable when read out of context in a courtroom. Furthermore, university sociology curricula ignore the predatory economic realities embedded within these court-mandated technologies. The literature presents these applications as universally accessible civic utilities. In reality, these platforms are operated by private, for-profit technology corporations that charge mandatory per-parent subscription fees. For an average working-class family in 2026, the cumulative cost of maintaining accounts on these apps, combined with the fees required to export certified logs for legal review, represents a significant, ongoing financial drain. If a low-income parent falls behind on their subscription payments, their access to the court-ordered communication channel can be suspended, effectively placing them in immediate violation of their custody decree and opening them up to contempt of court charges. The academic texts completely ignore this structural intersection of poverty, corporate profit, and legal vulnerability. We must also critique the way academic literature fails to account for the rise of algorithmic scheduling networks. Modern family management software does not merely log messages. It utilizes automated calendar algorithms to distribute parenting time and calculate compliance metrics. If a parent is late to a designated custody exchange point by 15 minutes due to unexpected traffic or workplace delays, the other parent can instantly log a non-compliance event within the app, backed by geographical location data tracked via smartphone telemetry. These micro-violations are systematically aggregated by the platform's database, creating a permanent statistical index of parental unreliability that can be weaponized in future litigation. The academic representation of post-separation communication has created a dangerous vacuum by failing to prepare family professionals for this hyper-surveilled environment. Law students and counseling candidates are trained to look at human relationship dynamics through the lens of psychology textbooks, while the actual system is being governed by digital dark patterns, data aggregation, and flawed sentiment algorithms. This mismatch leaves individuals navigating the real-world process entirely exposed to systemic manipulation, forcing them to survive in a digital panopticon, where a single uncalculated text message can alter the trajectory of their parental rights. As we deepen our critique of this systemic failure, we see that this pervasive digital tracking does not stop at text communication. The same algorithmic frameworks that monitor parental dialogue are being rapidly integrated into the financial surveillance networks that track asset dissipation, post-separation spending habits, and the real-time enforcement of support obligations. How exactly do these digital financial tracking systems intersect with the outdated economic models found in university textbooks? And how does this integration create an invisible automated trap for an individual's personal credit, housing access, and employment status? To understand how the academic canon has completely miscalculated the intersection of automated financial surveillance and systemic class vulnerability, we must analyze the hidden algorithmic machinery of modern child support enforcement networks, which we will dissect in the very next part of this masterclass. To look at the modern child support enforcement network is to see a system that functions completely independently of the traditional courtroom drama depicted in college textbooks. University family law volumes typically spend hundreds of pages analyzing constitutional due process, the right to a fair hearing, and the judicial balancing tests used to evaluate an individual's financial changes. The literature presents a clean, orderly process where a citizen can petition a judge, present a detailed net worth statement, and receive a tailored modification based on real-time economic adjustments. This conceptual framing completely ignores the reality of Title 4D of the Social Security Act and the massive, automated administrative state that governs child support enforcement in the United States today. Imagine if we designed a criminal justice system where an automated computer program could read a data mismatch, instantly find an individual guilty, freeze their bank accounts, and revoke their driving privileges without a single human being reviewing the case files. This is not a dystopian simulation. It is the daily operational reality of state child support enforcement computer systems in 2026. These systems do not operate via judicial mandates. They operate via administrative enforcement procedures that bypass the judiciary altogether. The foundational technology animating this system is the Federal Parent Locator Service, a centralized national network that conducts automated data matching across hundreds of disparate corporate and state databases. Every time an individual fills out a new hire reporting form at a job, opens a basic savings account, or registers a vehicle, that data is instantaneously transmitted to the national repository and matched against child support enforcement ledgers. To witness the profound human consequences of this automated architecture, let us analyze a detailed case study involving an independent automotive technician named Brandon, living in Baltimore, Maryland, in the year 2026. Brandon has spent the last year navigating a volatile income stream caused by supply chain disruptions in local manufacturing sectors. Because his child support obligation was calculated using the static, idealized income metrics found in state statutory manuals, his monthly support order assumes a steady, high-earning corporate salary that no longer corresponds to his material reality. Brandon intends to file for a formal modification, But the administrative court backlog means his hearing is scheduled 9 months into the future. While Brandon waits for his day in court, the automated child support computer system continues to run its month-end batch processing routines. The software does not possess an algorithm to measure local economic conditions, nor does it factor in Brandon's pending modification request. It looks at a single binary metric: whether Brandon's account balance reflects an arrearage equal to or greater than 60 days of support obligations. The moment Brandon crosses this mathematical threshold, the system automatically triggers a series of administrative enforcement protocols without human intervention. Step 1 of this automated process utilizes the Multi-State Financial Institution Data Match System, a specialized program that links child support agencies with thousands of banks, credit unions, and money market funds across the nation. The system performs a quarterly deterministic matching routine using Brandon's first name, last name, and security numbers. Within 48 hours of identifying a positive match, the software automatically generates and issues an administrative lien directly to Brandon's financial institution. This is known in enforcement manual terms as a freeze and seize procedure. Brandon wakes up on a Monday morning to discover that his business operating account, containing the capital he needs to purchase automotive parts and pay his shop rent, has been completely locked by his bank at the direction of the state child support computer system. The structural failure of the academic literature is exposed by what happens next. The textbooks used to train future lawyers suggest that Brandon can simply file an emergency motion to stay the asset seizure based on economic hardship. In reality, the administrative machinery is designed to prioritize capital collection over procedural agility. The private financial institution is legally required to hold the funds for a statutory period before transferring them directly to the state disbursement unit. During this time, Brandon cannot purchase inventory, cannot fulfill his commercial lease obligations, and cannot pay his basic utility bills. The system, attempting to enforce financial support for a child, effectively destroys the independent business structure that allows the parent to generate income in the first place. This self-defeating loop intensifies when the automated system engages its license suspension algorithms. In 2026, state child support systems feature automatic referral links to the Motor Vehicle Administration. Once a non-custodial parent matches the criteria for prolonged arrears, the computer system automatically transmits a digital certificate of non-compliance to the state transport database, initiating an administrative suspension of Brandon's driver's license. There is no requirement for a judicial officer to review whether Brandon requires his vehicle to perform his job, whether he lives in an area with accessible public transit, or whether suspending his driving privileges will permanently compromise his employment status. The potential outcome of this automated driver's license suspension system is the creation of a chronic, systemic poverty trap that disproportionately devastates working-class families. Once Brandon's license is administratively suspended, he cannot legally drive to his automotive repair shop, nor can he operate customer vehicles to perform diagnostic testing. If he continues to drive out of economic necessity to prevent total insolvency, he risks arrest, vehicle impoundment, and criminal charges that carry significant financial penalties and potential incarceration. If he complies with the suspension and stops driving, his business revenue drops to zero, making it completely impossible for him to pay the current support obligation or clear the accumulating arrearage balance. The automated system transforms an unworkable financial debt into a total economic paralysis, all while operating under a textbook narrative that frames these measures as objective tools of personal accountability. The core failure of U.S. academic texts is their absolute refusal to critique the class-based disparate impacts of this administrative automation. Sociology textbooks frequently present a sanitized analysis of child support compliance, characterizing parents who fall behind on payments as voluntary non-compliers who are actively choosing to withhold resources from their children. The literature routinely uses terms like parental cooperation indices without examining how these metrics are structurally biased against individuals operating within the gig economy, seasonal labor sectors, or informal employment networks. By flattening the complex reality of structural economic vulnerability into a moral narrative of personal failure, academic texts provide the ideological justification for a hyperpunitive, automated legal apparatus that treats poverty as a conscious choice. Furthermore, university curricula completely ignore the structural due process failures inherent in automated administrative systems. For example, legislative testimony from legal aid organizations highlights that automated license suspension networks consistently fail to provide reliable, advance notice to parents before their driving privileges are revoked. Because the systems rely on automated database mailing addresses that are frequently out of date due to the high housing instability of low-income individuals, thousands of parents remain entirely unaware that their licenses have been suspended until they are pulled over by law enforcement during a routine traffic stop. The academic literature ignores these structural friction points, choosing instead to publish abstract mathematical formulas that assume a frictionless, perfectly automated society where data matching is always accurate and notifications are always delivered. By tracing the trajectory of this administrative machinery, we see how deeply the academic representation of the divorce journey has failed the American public. The literature has constructed an idealized, clinical universe of voluntary mediation, balanced judicial metrics, and therapeutic closure, completely obscuring the real-world existence of an automated financial panopticon that monitors, freezes, and penalizes citizens through algorithmic batch processing. This systemic blindness leaves future legal and sociological professionals entirely unequipped to address the structural inequalities generated by the family court apparatus, leaving everyday families to navigate a punitive digital bureaucracy without institutional advocacy or theoretical defense. But as we expand our critique of this automated system, we discover that this administrative surveillance does not merely target the financial assets and driving privileges of the individual. The same data matching networks and algorithmic tracking models are now being extended into the realm of public housing, employment background checks, and automated state-level welfare reimbursement structures. How exactly do these multi-layered administrative systems weaponize child support debts to restrict an individual's access to affordable housing? And how does the state use these automated tools to recoup public assistance expenditures at the direct expense of the children themselves? To uncover the hidden mechanics of state-level welfare recovery networks and the total erasure of this exploitation within university textbooks, we must turn our attention to the structural intersection of family law and public assistance frameworks, which we will deconstruct in the very next part of this masterclass. When we look at the standard university textbook presentation of child support, it is almost universally depicted as a direct, friction-free financial transfer from one parent to another, specifically engineered to insulate children from the economic shocks of parental separation. The literature presents a clean, closed-loop model where private wealth is simply redistributed within a broken family unit to maintain household parity and combat child poverty. This narrative represents an egregious oversimplification taught to thousands of undergraduate and law students every single semester. The academic canon completely ignores the massive, state-sanctioned financial extraction apparatus established under Title 4D of the Social Security Act. When a family requires public assistance, the state immediately drops its theoretical role as a neutral, supportive arbiter and transforms into an aggressive debt collection agency, converting private domestic obligations into public revenue recovery mechanisms. To understand the precise operational mechanics of this administrative extraction, let us analyze a detailed scenario in the current year 2026. Imagine a single mother named Patricia, living in Atlanta, Georgia. Following a highly disruptive marital separation, Patricia is thrust into an immediate socio-economic crisis characterized by sudden housing instability, erratic employment shifts, and a complete lack of liquid capital. To secure basic survival resources for her two young children, she visits a state social services office to apply for temporary assistance for needy families, a program commonly known as TANF. To the authors of sociology textbooks, this is a standard, benevolent social safety net intervention. But hidden deep within the digital pages of the application lies a mandatory legal clause that completely rewrites the legal structure of her family's financial landscape: the statutory assignment of support rights. Under federal and state law, Patricia cannot simply receive public assistance as an entitlement. To qualify for a monthly cash grant, she is legally required to execute an absolute assignment of her rights to any and all current, past due, and future child support payments. The moment she signs the application, an automated digital notification is transmitted to the state child support enforcement database. Patricia no longer legally owns her child support order. The right to collect those funds has been entirely transferred to the government. If the children's non-custodial father, whom we will call Charles, operates a blue-collar automotive repair business and faithfully pays his mandated monthly support obligation of $600, the academic texts assume this capital flows directly into Patricia's household to purchase organic groceries, new shoes, and educational materials. In the actual legal reality of 2026, the state disbursement unit intercepts Charles's payment, routing it directly into a government treasury account to reimburse the state and federal governments for the cost of Patricia's public assistance grant. This brings us to a critical structural distortion known as the child support pass-through and disregard policy, a mechanism that is routinely omitted or heavily glossed over in family law curricula. Under federal guidelines, states are permitted, but not required, to allow a small fraction of the intercepted child support payment to pass through to the custodial parent, while disregarding that amount when calculating the family's ongoing eligibility for public assistance. Historical trends across the United States reveal a deeply fragmented and punitive landscape. A significant number of states pass through absolutely $0, retaining 100% of the non-custodial parent's payment to liquidate the state's welfare expenditures. In states that do utilize a pass-through policy, the caps are remarkably low, typically ranging from $50 per month for a single child to a maximum of $100 or $200 for multiple children. In Patricia's case, if the state pass-through is capped at $100, the remaining $500 paid by Charles is permanently withheld by the state bureaucracy. The children never see a single dime of that remaining balance, yet Charles is legally credited with fulfilling his obligation. The systemic failure of this model intensifies dramatically if Charles experiences a macroeconomic disruption, such as a localized supply chain failure, and misses several consecutive monthly payments. Because the assignment of rights remains absolute during the public assistance period, any missed payments do not accrue as a personal debt owed to Patricia or the children. Instead, they are classified as state-assigned arrears, a severe form of public debt owed directly to the government. Case studies from major policy institutions like the Urban Institute demonstrate that these government-owed arrears accumulate compounding interest penalties, which in many jurisdictions hover at an extraordinary 10% annually. Charles is no longer just a father struggling to navigate a temporary economic downturn. He is an involuntary debtor to an automated state collection machine that systematically weaponizes his poverty against his parental status. This aggressive extraction model directly undermines the core developmental and psychological theories printed in mainstream family studies textbooks. The literature heavily emphasizes that regular financial contributions from non-custodial parents foster a profound sense of shared parental responsibility, pride, and ongoing emotional engagement, which in turn predicts highly positive cognitive outcomes for developing children. However, the textbooks completely fail to analyze the psychological devastation that occurs when the state intercepts those contributions for welfare recoupment. When Charles discovers that his grueling physical labor does not translate into immediate, tangible material benefits for his flesh and blood, but instead vanishes into a faceless government spreadsheet to offset a state deficit, his psychological incentive to cooperate with the formal system completely evaporates. He is forced into a devastating paradox, continuing to pay into a punitive state mechanism that actively strips away his financial capacity to provide direct, informal support, such as purchasing a winter coat, buying fresh groceries, or funding a school field trip directly for his children during his scheduled parenting time. Furthermore, university sociology and legal textbooks completely fail to document the unnavigability of state-level debt relief frameworks, such as the Compromise of Arrears program. The literature often presents these programs as progressive, functional safety valves that allow low-income parents to settle a portion of their government-owed debt based on their true earning capacity. But empirical case studies reveal that the application processes are buried under layers of impenetrable bureaucratic red tape. They require indigent individuals to navigate complex legal forms without court-appointed counsel, produce years of flawless historical tax and banking documentation, and provide immediate lump sum cash payments that an impoverished parent simply cannot access. The academic canon highlights these policies to project an image of institutional fairness, completely ignoring the data showing that the vast majority of parents trapped in public assistance payback debt are structurally locked out of relief due to administrative friction and a total lack of systemic advocacy. By treating child support enforcement as a moral crusade against voluntary non-compliers, U.S. academic texts mask a highly calculated system of fiscal substitution. The state uses the capital extracted from working class, non-custodial parents to fund the operational costs of the enforcement machinery itself, creating a self-perpetuating bureaucratic ecosystem that thrives on the generation and collection of low-income familial debt. This represents a profound structural inequality that falls disproportionately upon minority and economically vulnerable communities, yet it remains completely unaddressed in mainstream academic analysis. The textbooks maintain a sanitized, idealized narrative of child welfare and poverty alleviation, while the actual statutory machinery operates as an aggressive revenue extraction engine that destabilizes the fragile post-separation economic foundations of working-class families across the United States. This multi-layered extraction network does not operate in a vacuum. The debt profiles generated by the automated welfare recoupment system do not merely sit in static state agency computer databases. They are systematically exported into the wider commercial marketplace. When an individual's administrative account reflects thousands of dollars in government-owed child support arrears, that data is instantaneously broadcast to national credit bureaus, consumer reporting networks, and private risk assessment firms. How exactly does this automated transmission of state-generated debt intersect with the commercial algorithms used by modern corporate landlords, tenant screening agencies, and employment background checkers in 2026? What happens when a parent's attempt to rebuild their financial and professional life post-separation is completely blocked by an invisible, algorithmically generated credit blacklist? To discover how the academic representation of the divorce journey completely ignores this digital economic quarantine, we must analyze the structural intersection of consumer credit reporting laws and automated housing exclusion networks, which we will dissect in the very next part of this masterclass. The automated transmission of family court debt into the commercial credit reporting ecosystem represents the exact point where academic theory completely abandons the modern American citizen. If you examine the pages of standard university economics and sociology textbooks, the process of rebuilding a life after marital separation is described using optimistic, therapeutic vocabulary. The literature frequently discusses the concept of residential mobility, framing the relocation of parents into separate households as a standard, logistically straightforward phase of post-divorce adaptation. The textbooks operate under the assumption that the housing market is a neutral arena, where access is determined solely by a rational calculation of income versus rent. They completely fail to account for the invisible algorithmic dragnet that links state-level child support databases directly to national consumer reporting agencies, creating a state-sanctioned economic quarantine that locks individuals out of the modern financial system. To understand how this hidden pipeline functions under federal law, we must look at the structural intersection of Title 4D of the Social Security Act and the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Under federal mandates, every state child support enforcement agency is legally required to automatically report the name of any obligor who owes past due support to consumer reporting agencies once the arrearage exceeds a specific statutory threshold, which in many jurisdictions is as low as $1,000. This data transfer does not require a judicial hearing, a consumer notification, or an evaluation of the individual's underlying economic circumstances. The state agency's computer system performs an automated batch export every 30 days, broadcasting the debt directly to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Once this data hits the commercial credit bureaus, it is not categorized as a standard consumer debt, such as an unpaid credit card or a medical bill. Instead, it is hard-coded into the consumer's file as a specialized public record or a high-risk collection item. This classification causes an immediate, catastrophic drop in the individual's credit score, often slashing a prime FICO or Vantage score by over 100 points in a single reporting cycle. While standard textbooks teach undergraduate students that credit scores are dynamic reflections of personal financial responsibility, they completely ignore how the automated injection of family court debt instantly transforms an otherwise financially responsible professional into a high-risk subprime consumer, completely altering their potential outcomes in the modern economy. To see the devastating real-world execution of this digital quarantine, let us analyze a detailed case study involving a graphic designer named Derek, living in Phoenix, Arizona, in the current year 2026. Derek recently went through a complex separation that resulted in an unworkable child support order calculated during a temporary peak in his freelance business revenue. When his income normalized, the automated statutory formulas discussed previously threw his account into an immediate arrearage balance of $2,400, while he waited for a distant modification hearing date. In the spring of 2026, Derek attempts to secure a modest two-bedroom apartment in Phoenix to establish a safe, stable environment for his children during his mandated weekend parenting time. He identifies an apartment within his budget and submits a standard lease application, paying a non-refundable processing fee. The property management corporation overseeing the complex does not employ a human being to read Derek's application or review his pristine decade-long history of timely rent payments. Instead, the corporation utilizes an automated tenant screening algorithm operated by a third-party consumer reporting agency. The tenant screening software executes an instantaneous data scraping routine. It pulls Derek's credit file from the national bureaus and isolates the automated Title 4D child support arrearage flag. The algorithm is programmed to treat any government-reported public record or ongoing child support collection item as an absolute high-risk indicator, signifying potential future lease default. The software does not possess the capacity to understand that this debt is the result of an administrative delay in a family court modification track. It applies a rigid, pre-programmed deduction matrix, automatically plummeting Derek's tenant reliability score into the failing zone. Within 90 seconds of submitting his application, Derek receives an automated, system-generated adverse action email stating that his lease application has been denied due to information contained within his consumer report. This case study exposes the total failure of the academic narrative surrounding post-separation residential mobility. Human development and family studies textbooks routinely present idealized guidelines on how parents should structure their separate households, emphasizing the importance of providing children with dedicated bedrooms, familiar toys, and a sense of domestic continuity in both environments. The literature completely flattens the material reality, ignoring the fact that algorithmic housing exclusion networks make it structurally impossible for a blacklisted parent to secure an apartment in a safe, accessible neighborhood. Derek is forced into a brutal game of survival. Blocked by corporate landlords, he must rely on subprime, unregulated housing options, such as renting an uninsulated backroom from an acquaintance or moving into a high-cost, short-term extended-stay motel. This housing instability directly sabotages Derek's standing in his ongoing custody dispute. When the court-appointed custody evaluator conducts a residential inspection, they do not critique the automated credit infrastructure that forced Derek into substandard housing. Instead, they look at the material reality through the pathologizing lens of standard child psychology textbooks. The evaluator notes that Derek's temporary motel living arrangement lacks a dedicated space for the children, constitutes an unstable environment, and fails to meet the baseline criteria for overnight parenting time. The automated credit reporting system creates an economic barrier, and the family court system then uses that exact barrier to justify stripping Derek of his parental contact hours, creating a closed loop of institutional punishment. Furthermore, university business and legal curricula completely ignore how this digital economic quarantine extends into the realm of professional employment background checks. In 2026, a significant percentage of U.S. employers utilize automated credit screening tools as part of their pre-employment vetting protocols, particularly for positions that involve corporate data access, financial management, or logistical oversight. When Derek applies for a senior design position at a major marketing firm to generate the income needed to clear his state-assigned arrears, the employer's automated background screening system flags the child support collection record. The corporate hiring algorithm interprets the public record as an indicator of personal financial distress, which it equates with high operational risk and potential workplace unreliability. Derek is passed over for the position in favor of a candidate with an unblemished, non-separated credit profile, destroying his ability to achieve the exact financial recovery mandated by the state. The academic representation of the divorce journey remains stubbornly anchored in a pre-algorithmic era, publishing abstract theories about emotional resilience and social adaptation, while completely omitting the concrete, data-driven structures that control access to shelter, employment, and financial liquidity in the United States today. By treating credit reporting and tenant screening as disconnected commercial externalities, rather than direct, predictable extensions of the family court apparatus, university texts leave future professionals completely blind to the true mechanics of socioeconomic stratification. They train students to offer superficial, clinical advice to families navigating separation, completely unaware that those families are being systematically crushed by an automated financial panopticon that treats a family court dispute as a permanent consumer blemish. As we look at the total scope of this institutional failure, we realize that this digital economic quarantine is not a glitch in the system. It is the natural consequence of a wider, systemic inertia that governs the entire academic establishment. The refusal of textbooks to document the hyper-surveilled, automated reality of modern family law is directly tied to the financial and ideological structures that support the university-industrial complex itself. How exactly does the monopolistic landscape of academic publishing preserve these outdated mid-century myths? And what are the specific institutional incentives that prevent professors, researchers, and textbook authors from updating their curricula to reflect the true empirical reality of the American public? To understand how the academic factory profit models actively depend on the replication of these systemic distortions, and to discover the definitive roadmap for how we can synthesize this entire critique to reclaim personal autonomy from institutional dogma, we must turn our attention to the final structural layer of the university machine, which we will deconstruct in the absolute conclusion of this masterclass series. To understand why the university machine continues to replicate these systemic distortions, we must examine the financial mechanics of the academic publishing monopoly that controls higher education in the United States. When students enter a university lecture hall, they assume that the textbook assigned to them represents the absolute pinnacle of current, empirical discovery. They believe that a multi-billion-dollar industry has curated the latest data to prepare them for their professional careers. This assumption ignores the monopolistic landscape of academic publishing, where a tiny handful of massive corporate syndicates control over 80% of the global textbook market. These corporations operate on a business model that is structurally dependent on the continuous generation of new editions, not because the underlying science has changed, but because the used textbook market cannibalizes their corporate profit margins every semester. To preserve these profit margins, a publisher does not commission a ground-up reevaluation of sociological or legal frameworks. Instead, they implement what is known in the industry as a superficial update cycle. Every 3 to 4 years, an editorial team alters the pagination, shuffles the order of the chapters, adds a few contemporary cultural references, and prints a brand new edition with a higher price tag. The core theoretical scaffolding, the outdated linear timeline models, the uncorrected econometric formulas from the mid-1980s, and the pathologizing psychological paradigms remains completely untouched. This creates an institutional lag where the literature used to train the family lawyers, judges, and therapists of 2026 is structurally anchored in paradigms that were obsolete before the turn of the century. Imagine if you were a progressive researcher trying to break through this wall of institutional inertia. Let us look at a case study involving a sociology professor named Chloe, working at a prominent university in Boston, Massachusetts, in the current year 2026. Chloe conducts an exhaustive, data-driven study analyzing how modern algorithmic tenant screening networks and automated child support enforcement software disproportionately penalize low-income fathers who are actively attempting to co-parent. She compiles flawless empirical data demonstrating that the traditional deficit models published in mainstream family studies textbooks are actively harming real-world familial stability. When Chloe submits her findings to elite peer-reviewed journals for publication, she encounters the closed citation loop of the academic tenure track. The peer reviewers assigned to evaluate her work are the very same senior faculty members whose entire careers, published monographs, and grant funding histories are built upon the legacy frameworks Chloe is actively challenging. If a reviewer validates Chloe's paper, they are implicitly admitting that the textbooks they authored and the lectures they have delivered for 25 years are built on flawed methodologies. Under the guise of maintaining rigorous academic standards, the reviewers demand impossible control groups, reject her modern algorithmic analysis as digital externality, and effectively bury the study. Chloe is forced to choose between conforming to the legacy narrative to secure her tenure or publishing her groundbreaking data in obscure, non-indexed journals that family court judges and textbook editors will never read. This institutional echo chamber creates a profound ideological socialization process. Future family law practitioners and mental health professionals spend years marinating in a literature that frames human separation as a toxic, pathologized failure managed by static bureaucratic charts. By the time they enter the real-world workforce, their analytical lenses have been permanently distorted. When they encounter a parent who is angry, grieving, or financially devastated by the system, they do not see a human being experiencing a rational, acute response to an adversarial apparatus. Instead, they see a textbook case of emotional instability, parental alienation, or a non-cooperative profile. The system converts its own systemic trauma into personal pathology, and it uses the authority of university science to justify that conversion. To reclaim personal autonomy from this institutional dogma, we must synthesize this entire 10-part masterclass into a definitive empirical roadmap. The first step in overriding the textbook myth is the total rejection of the internalized narrative of failure. When an individual understands that the societal stigmas, the combative legal strategies, and the rigid court evaluations are not reflections of their personal moral capability, but are rather the predictable outputs of an antiquated institutional blueprint, they can strip away the emotional manipulation that drives high-stakes litigation. You are not operating within a forum designed to achieve human closure, You are operating within a bureaucratic machinery designed to process assets and assign financial liabilities. The second step requires a sophisticated, data-driven approach to information management. In an era where family court judges are trained to accept automated software summaries, sentiment scores, and credit flags as absolute truths, a parent must become the ultimate archivist of their own reality. This means anticipating the algorithmic traps of court-mandated communication applications. It means engineering your digital footprint to project a continuous, unassailable record of neutral, business-like logistics. If the system is looking for a reason to apply a pathologized textbook profile to your behavior, you deny them the raw data required to build that profile by converting every interaction into a clear, transparent, and non-reactive digital transaction. The final step in this roadmap is the strategic implementation of independent forensic analysis. Because state-mandated statutory formulas and child support algorithms rely on outdated consumer expenditure arrays and flawed capital duplication models, an individual cannot simply accept the automated output of a court spreadsheet. You must force the court to confront the real material costs of modern survival by presenting granular, localized economic evidence. This involves documenting the exact cost configurations of your specific urban environment, calculating the true marginal expenses of duplicated household infrastructure, and utilizing independent, modern financial metrics to challenge the generic statutory grids hard-coded into family court software. You must use empirical reality to break through the automated assumptions of the administrative state. By deconstructing the multi-layered architecture of the family court apparatus, from the historical miscalculations of early 20th century sociology to the modern digital panopticon of financial surveillance, we expose the profound gap between institutional theory and human survival. The academic representation of the divorce journey in the United States has failed because it chose to value transactional efficiency, corporate profit, and bureaucratic order over the messy, fluid, and resilient reality of human relationships. The textbooks painted a picture of inevitable collapse, structural deficiency, and lifelong pathology. But the true data of the American public reveals a completely different potential outcome: a historical trend of individuals who, when freed from the constraints of institutional manipulation, are entirely capable of restructuring their lives, preserving their wealth, protecting their children, and building stable, thriving dual household futures. We have peeled back every single layer of the machine, from the courtroom floor to the publisher's boardroom, but the ultimate critique does not end with the university industrial complex. Even as you equip yourself with the data to defeat these textbook myths, an entirely new structural threat is quietly mobilizing behind the scenes of the American legal landscape. A highly organized coalition of private equity firms and venture capital-backed software conglomerates has begun aggressively lobbying state legislatures to completely automate the judicial decision-making process itself, using advanced predictive algorithms to determine custody rights, asset allocation, and parental fitness without any human oversight. How exactly are these corporate syndicates weaponizing the legacy academic texts we just deconstructed to build an automated, AI-driven family court grid? And what does this mean for the future of constitutional due process in the United States? To uncover the hidden corporate money trail behind the impending algorithmic takeover of family law, we must turn our focus to the next evolutionary phase of this systemic investigation.